Okay, so this is our feedback session for our second assignment. I just wanted to start off by asking how you think you did, and actually specifically what you think you did well on.
Um, Overall, I found it a bit of a struggle to do this assignment just because there were so many different components, and I've covered everything's there. I'm quite happy with the portfolio. I think there's quite a lot of evidence for the scheme of work and the lesson plans and the marked assignments. I think that's all quite fully complete. In terms of the structure of some of the bits, maybe the structure of the reflection, I could have maybe done a bit more work on that. Maybe some bits are a bit missing there. I don't know. I just find it difficult to structure the bits, so I'm conscious there's a bit of repetition between reflection and between rationale and critical comparison, I guess.
Okay, that's fair enough. I want to start by talking about your scheme of work. I'm really impressed with it. It's very well laid out. You start off with the assessment objectives from the exam board. You're constantly referring back to them within all your activities. You also make reference to your school policy and sort of how that's been applied to your assessment methods, your objectives, and things like that. You've got sort of homework tasks for each lesson. They're all very relevant to the objectives for that lesson. So I think that's really good. The only issue I'd really bring up with that is just a quick note on the layout, is make sure that you have the columns for your activities and your plans, everything, just labelled clearly, because it was a little bit unclear which column was which. But It was fairly easy to see just from the content, but it just took a bit of figuring out.
Okay, sure, yeah, that'll definitely be something I can do.
Good. Okay, moving on to the comparison, I really liked how you had it sort of laid out sort of in a really logical order. So you started with some basic information about each of the courses, moved on to sort of talk about the different types of curriculum, and then moving on from there to assessment methods based off that. What would have been nice to include at the end is maybe a sort of a conclusion or a summary, just sort of tying it all together. I think that would have been really good, and I think you certainly had sort of room in your word count to add something like that. Okay. You show a lot of reference to wider reading, and actually I think your references and quotes are sort of really well integrated into your text, so it all sort of flows very well. What you can sometimes find is that a quote that's been included has, say, sort of broken up the text in a way and can make it sort of a bit make it sort of seem to jump around a bit, but yours just sort of like you've sort of integrated your quotes into the sentences and the points you're making, and I think that's really good. So that shows sort of good background reading, good sort of knowledge of, say, your different assessment methods, the norm and criterion referencing methods. The only point in terms of those that I think I'd want to improve would be making sure that you actually you show sort of good knowledge of what these are, but maybe a bit more on why they're appropriate to, say, an academic curriculum or a vocational one. So for example, why so you said that the vocational scheme of work used criterion referencing in the portfolio. Why is that appropriate when academic ones use norm instead, and why is that more appropriate?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really clear.
Okay, good. Let's see. Other than that, just a note, you have a lot of sort of aside phrases in parentheses. It's okay for the most part, but just be careful when using a lot of them in succession, because there have been a couple of points where you're saying forgotten to close it off at the end after. But other than that, no issues with sort of spelling, grammar, punctuation, anything like that. That's really impressive, all really clear. Okay. Onto your rationale. That was actually much stronger in terms of the explanation front, which I guess makes sense given that it's a rationale, but you've sort of been very clear in why your different assessment methods have, sort of why you've chosen these different assessment methods. And another thing I'm very happy with in your rationale actually is you went into a lot of detail on sort of your evaluation, specifically said why it was tailored to your students. So you sort of talked about how they've not done much in the way of sort of evaluation before, so you made most of it multiple choice, but at the same time still had those qualitative questions, just a couple of short ones to make sure you actually got as much meaningful information from the students as you could. I think that was really well thought out and just really well tailored to your students' needs. One thing that would be good though in the rationale is you've got this, as I said earlier, really good scheme of work, but the rationale doesn't actually refer to a huge amount of it, at least not specifically. So the front page of your scheme of work has a sort of a lot of general points on sort of teaching styles and assessment methods and things, and you refer to that a lot, but you never sort of make any reference to any specific tasks or specific lessons.
Okay.
And I just think it almost seems like a waste that you've got this brilliant scheme of work and you're not making the full use of it in your writing. Okay. Do you think that's a fair?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair appraise, and I'll definitely be able to work on some of those points and include them in to improve the assignment.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
That's okay. So then just quickly onto the evaluation assessment and the reflection on that. As I've already mentioned, I think the evaluation was very well sort of tailored to your students' needs. Similarly, I think your assessment was, the questions all seem sort of very relevant to the objectives that you had in your scheme of work. And you've made good use of them in your reflection. You've sort of, in each case, you've identified either, so for the assessment you said what the students are good at, what they're not so good at. For the evaluation, what they liked, what they didn't like, and in each case you've then sort of gone on to develop those points. So for example, in your evaluation you noted that the students enjoyed their group work, and so you put in your action plan, going to make sure I keep planning lessons like that, maybe include a bit more. And so yeah, I just think you've been really clear in your in your action plan there, just sort of like how you've related your action plan directly to the feedback that you got from your students. I think that's really good. And similarly with the assessment, you've identified strong and weak points and said what it is the students need to do to develop, to move on to a higher grade, and then put in place an action plan to actually to do that. All very clear. The only issue the only change I'd really make to that is this last paragraph here. It's your action plan for your assessment. I think that would better be moved earlier on to where you were talking about your assessment here.
Yeah.
Because, like I say, you've got you talk about your assessment, you talk about the information you got from it, and then you go on to talk about evaluation for a bit, and then go back to your action plan for your assessment.
Yeah, that's a good point about the structure.
Yeah, so I think it'd be good, so once you've identified the strengths and weaknesses of the students, then go on to say, therefore I will do this, and that's, I think, that makes a lot more sense. Okay. Are there any questions you have about...
No, I think your feedback's been very clear, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you very much.